This all started back in 2005 when I was working as a research assistant through a temp agency at an industrial refrigeration company. The pay was decent and I was good at my job, even managed to solve a major issue with an ice maker that was saving the company millions in service calls from one of our biggest clients. My direct supervisor was this senior research technician who'd been with the company for over 30 years. He was approaching 50, had a massive ego, could be funny when he wanted to be. We actually got along pretty well at first. Everything changed after his 50th birthday party at work. The Monday after, he came in bragging about taking a drunk female coworker home and, well, you can guess the rest. Unfortunately for him, another coworker who had a crush on this woman overheard everything. A few days later, Human Resources called me in for a statement. The HR representative asked me to discuss some allegations about my supervisor's conduct after the party. I tried to play it safe and told them I honestly didn't hear much about it. I tried to downplay what I knew because I didn't want to cause trouble. Looking back, that was probably too nice of me. About a month later, I got an unexpected call. The temp agency representative told me my assignment had ended, effective immediately. I wasn't too worried at first. That's pretty normal for temp work. But when I went back to have lunch with some work friends, my former supervisor completely lost it. He started yelling, demanding to know what I was doing there and telling me I needed to leave right away. When I tried to explain I was just having lunch with friends, he got even angrier and shouted that I wasn't welcome there anymore. After I left, my friends did some digging and discovered the truth. The senior tech had gotten me fired as revenge for participating in the HR investigation, even though I'd tried to protect him. He'd waited a month so it wouldn't look like retaliation and made up a bunch of lies about my performance. What this genius forgot was that I had all his dirty secrets stored on my flash drive. Back then we didn't have cloud storage or servers. We just carried our files between different lab computers. And I had spreadsheets. Lots of spreadsheets. I sent his bosses proof that he'd been faking test data for years. But that wasn't even the worst part. Turned out he'd been running a side business selling test units to his friends at heavily discounted prices. He'd take new units off the production line, claim they were for testing, then sell them under the table with a nice finder's fee for himself. When they started investigating, he tried calling me. He had the nerve to ask why I was making up lies about him and trying to ruin him. I fired back, reminding him that he was the one who stabbed me in the back after I tried to help him. I challenged him about his lies, specifically bringing up the custom cow print cooler that had disappeared, the one he'd sold to that ice cream shop along with those 3 brand new units that still had factory seals on them. The investigation revealed everything. He lost his job, his retirement benefits, his house, and even his precious customized truck. But here's where it gets even better. 3 years later, I'm working at a new company, sitting on an interview panel. Guess who walks in? The same guy. The moment we made eye contact, I gave him my biggest Cheshire Cat grin, while he looked like he'd seen a ghost. During the discussion with other panel members, I mentioned that I had some previous experience with this candidate that might be relevant to our decision. When another panel member asked me to elaborate, I explained everything that had happened. The funny thing is, our candidate pool was so weak that they still offered him the job, which he turned down. I like to think it was because of me sitting there, smiling at him, knowing I'd be his co-worker again. Some people say karma's a harsh teacher, but in this case, I think she needed a teaching assistant. Fresh out of trade school and working as a maintenance technician at a local manufacturing plant, I was eager to start my independent life. The pay was decent, but living alone in our area was pretty expensive. That's when I met him through a mutual friend at a barbecue. He seemed perfect on paper, steady job as a bartender, similar age, and we both enjoyed having friends over for game nights. We hit it off immediately, sharing stories about our horrible college dorms and agreeing that anything would be better than that. Within a week, we had found a decent 2-bedroom apartment and signed the lease. The first few months were great. We split the bills evenly, kept the common areas clean, and even hosted some awesome parties together. But then things started changing slowly. I began noticing more and more empty bottles around the apartment. At first, I thought they were just left over from our gatherings, but soon I realized they appeared even when we hadn't had anyone over. I asked him if everything was okay, mentioning that I've been noticing a lot of bottles lately. He just brushed it off, saying he'd been having some rough nights at work and that's how it goes in the service industry. I didn't push it. Everyone has their demons, right? Plus, he was still paying his share of the rent and utilities on time, so I figured it wasn't my place to judge. We continued having friends crash on our couch occasionally, and life went on. The apartment took some wear and tear, a few holes in the walls from when some idiots decided to play with toy guns inside, some carpet stains that weren't our fault but definitely didn't help, but nothing major. Then I got transferred to another work site. It was about 45 minutes away from our apartment, but my grandparents lived closer to it. It made sense to stay with them during my work days and only come back to the apartment a few times a week. That's when everything went downhill. I had already given notice at the apartment since I was planning to move to Arizona for a better job opportunity. Every time I came back, I'd spend hours packing my stuff into my old Mazda, patching up walls, and deep cleaning everything I could. I wanted to get our security deposit back. It wasn't huge, but money is money. Then came the day that made my blood boil. I returned after a few days away to find what looked like a recycling center had exploded in our kitchen. Bags upon bags of empty bottles and cans were piled almost waist high. There was a fresh hole punched in the wall near the bathroom, and whoever did it, though I had a pretty good guess who, had tried to fix it by stuffing it with bendy straws. Bendy freaking straws. When I confronted him about the mess, he was clearly hungover and just mumbled about having some friends over and things getting a bit wild. When I pointed out that the wall looked like someone had tried to fight it, he lazily promised he'd fix it. But I knew better than to wait for him to fix anything. I spent the next 2 days cleaning up his mess and properly patching the hole. Before leaving for another work stretch, I sent him a message telling him that I'd fixed the hole and all he needed to do was get color-matching paint and cover the patch. I emphasized that it was just that one thing and reminded him the walkthrough was in 3 days. He texted back saying it wouldn't be a problem and he'd take care of it. Guess what? He didn't. I showed up a couple hours before the walkthrough to find the patch still clearly visible. I had to rush to the hardware store, buy the paint myself, and quickly paint over it. I barely had time to air out the place before the property manager arrived. During the inspection, the property manager commented that while they could smell fresh paint, they couldn't find where it was coming from, complimenting me on doing a really good job with the repairs. I just thanked them and tried to act casual. A week later, I received the security deposit check in my name. Looking at that check, I thought about all the hours I spent cleaning up his messes, fixing his damage, and basically being his maid. I remembered every time he promised to help but didn't, every mess I came home to, and especially those stupid bendy straws. I called my roommate with some bad news. I told him that they had charged us for the carpet cleaning and damages, claiming the stains were too deep to remove. He got really angry, demanding to know how much they took. I simply told him they'd kept all of it. Was it petty? Maybe. But watching him rage about the unfair property management company while I deposited his share of the deposit into my account felt like justice. It wasn't much money, probably just enough to cover what a handyman would have charged for the repairs I did myself. But it was something. I moved to Arizona the following week, blocked his number, and never looked back. I later learned that he got evicted from his next apartment for property damage. Some people never change, but at least I got paid for dealing with his chaos. 20 years ago, my father passed away, leaving behind a small cabin he had built with his own hands. Every inch of that place was filled with his dedication, from the carefully placed stones in the walls to the meticulously tended garden. After his death, I couldn't bring myself to visit. The memories were too raw, too painful. My mother felt the same way, having never been particularly attached to the place, even when Dad was alive. Realizing neither of us would be using the cabin for a while, we decided to shut off all utilities. The electricity and phone companies were completely understanding. The water company, however, was a different story. When I called them to shut off the water service, explaining that the owner had passed away, they simply told me that only the account holder could make such a request. I tried explaining that he was deceased and that I had all the necessary documentation, death certificate and property transfer papers, but they just repeated their policy that only the account holder could make changes to the account. This same conversation played out dozens of times over the next few months. We tried everything: emails, faxes, in-person visits, even certified mail with all the legal documents. The monthly fee was barely $2 because we had our own, but it was the principle of the matter. My mother and I asked around and discovered that many people had faced the same issue. Most just stopped paying, letting the company cut off service naturally. Getting lawyers involved would cost more than years of water bills, so we followed suit and closed a connected bank account. Fast forward 20 years. I'm at my family house when I get a call from the same water company. The representative told me they were closing inactive accounts that were 20 years old, but there was an outstanding balance of 11.93. They insisted that the account holder needed to come in person to close it. When I reminded them that the account holder had been dead for 20 years and that I'd sent multiple death certificates, the supervisor simply stated that for accounts older than X years, they needed the account holder to appear in person with a paper copy or they couldn't proceed. Now here's where timing played perfectly into my hands. In my country, burial plots are rented in 3 to 5 year increments. My father's 20-year period had just ended, and my mother had decided to surrender the plot. We had literally just received a box containing his cleaned and prepared remains that week. I decided enough was enough. I put on my gothist outfit, flowing purple silk, dark makeup, and every piece of occult-looking jewelry I owned. I grabbed a Ouija board and the box containing my father's remains and headed to their office. The supervisor was sitting in an open-plan office with their director and several other employees when I walked in. She started to repeat her spiel about the account holder needing to be there in person, but I cut her off by announcing that I had indeed brought him with me so he could tell them himself. I placed the Ouija board and the box of remains on her desk with a loud thunk. The entire office went silent. I began dramatically calling out to the spirits of the beyond, asking my father to give us a sign of his presence. Right on cue, something fell off a nearby desk, making everyone jump. I dramatically moved the Ouija board planchette to yes and announced that the spirits were with us, ready to provide that signature they needed. The director finally snapped out of his shocked state and tried to usher me into his office to resolve the situation. I called him out on their sudden willingness to help after 20 years of demanding a dead man show up in person, telling him that if I had to deal with their absurd requirements, they would have to witness the supernatural consultation required to fulfill them. When I packed up my things, I reminded them that denying legal title claims was grounds for a lawsuit, and I had 20 years of documentation of their company doing exactly that. The director immediately changed his tune, saying they could close the account right away. When he tried to bring up the outstanding balance, I shut him down before he could even finish the sentence. I walked out, leaving behind an office full of slack-jawed employees and one very flustered director. Haven't heard a peep from them since. When I told my mother about it, she just laughed and said it wasn't worth pursuing further. My only regret is not recording their faces when I pulled out that Ouija board. I bought my house 5 years ago after finally landing my dream job as a software developer. It was perfect. A cozy 2-bedroom place with a basement and a nice yard in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The price was surprisingly reasonable, and I later found out why. The neighbors across the street were a complete nightmare. A middle-aged couple who seemed to think they owned the entire neighborhood. From day one, they made life difficult for everyone around them. Their massive SUV was always parked in the most inconsiderate ways possible. Some days it would block half of my driveway, other days they'd park it right across someone else's. Whenever anyone complained, the husband would just shrug and tell us they'd move it later, without even looking up from his phone. Whenever anyone raised concerns, the wife would just smugly tell them that if they didn't like it, they could always move somewhere else. That was her standard response to any complaints. But the parking was just the beginning. Their yard looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Rusty car parts, broken furniture, and random junk scattered everywhere. The grass would grow knee-high before they'd finally mow it, usually after getting a notice from the homeowners association. The worst part was their German Shepherd. Don't get me wrong, I love dogs, but these people would just open their back door and let their dog roam free, despite having a perfectly good fenced backyard. The dog would do its business wherever it pleased, and guess who never cleaned up after it? One day I confronted them about their dog leaving mess in my yard again. The wife just brushed me off, claiming there was no proof it was their dog since there were plenty of other dogs in the neighborhood. When I told her I had literally seen their dog do it that morning, she just shrugged and suggested that maybe I should build a fence if I was so worried about it. This went on for years. I tried talking to them, left polite notes, even contacted the homeowners association, but nothing changed. Then one glorious day, I noticed a moving truck in their driveway. It was like Christmas had come early. But these people couldn't even move out like normal humans. No, they had to drag it out over 2 whole months. They cleared out most of their stuff in the first 3 weeks, but kept coming back for random items they'd left behind. Each time they'd return, they'd sort through their remaining belongings like they were archaeological treasures. Whatever they didn't want would end up in a huge pile in their driveway, waiting to be taken to the dump eventually. That's when I had my brilliant idea. I've been storing some old furniture and broken appliances in my basement, planning to take them to the dump someday. Well, someday had arrived. Late one night when the street was quiet, I started making trips across the street. An old broken microwave here, a rusty bike frame there, some damaged IKEA furniture that had seen better days. All of it went into their pile. I even threw in that ancient tube TV that had been taking up space since I moved in. The next day I was working from my home office window when they showed up in their SUV. The husband was the first to notice, asking in confusion where all the extra junk had come from. His wife quickly realized someone had been dumping their trash in their pile. The husband was outraged, complaining about how they were paying good money to have it hauled away. The wife threatened to call the police. I just sat at my window, thinking to myself how they'd never be able to prove it wasn't theirs. The wife stormed up and down the street, knocking on doors and demanding to know who had added to their pile. But nobody answered. After all, they weren't exactly the most popular people in the neighborhood. They couldn't even prove anything was added because their pile was already such a mess. They had no choice but to haul it all away, including my contributions. I calculated that the dump fees for my added items probably equaled all the time I'd spent cleaning up after their dog over the years. They finally finished moving out a few weeks later. As their SUV drove away for the last time, I noticed something funny. They had accidentally left behind one last little gift on their former driveway. Their dog had apparently decided to leave them a goodbye present too. I heard that they tried to dispute the dump fees with the moving company, claiming someone had added to their pile. The moving company basically told them what they had been telling us all these years. Prove it. New neighbors moved in last month. They have a properly fenced yard, keep their house tidy, and always park in their garage.